Imagine a sister lost to a tragic accident, buried in a closed casket, mourned for a decade, only to walk into her sister's wedding, alive, with a truth so shocking it unravels everything you thought you knew about identity and secrets. Welcome to the narrative nest, where today's story will grip your heart and linger in your mind long after it ends. 10 years ago, they buried her body in a closed casket, a funeral full of tears, a town that moved Annex, her sister, who never stopped waiting. Then, on the day of her sister's wedding, she walked through the orchard path like a ghost, wearing her old face. But the woman they buried wasn't her. What you're about to hear will change the way you see identity, memory, and the terrifying power of silence. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? Drop your city or country. Below, I read every single one. Now, take a breath, because this story will stay with you long after it ends. The sky above Boise, Idaho, had that kind of color you only see in old photographs, soft gold smeared with gray. It was a late summer afternoon, and a warm breeze moved through the air like a sigh held for too long. Wind chimes danced somewhere near the barn, and laughter echoed from the wedding tent set up on the Moore family property. Rows of white chairs faced a modest wooden arch laced with ivy. It was Emma Moore's wedding day. The scent of wildflowers floated through the orchard. Guests moved about with flutes of champagne in hand, snapping photos and murmuring about how beautiful the bride looked. Emma stood near the house in a cream lace gown that hugged her like it had been sewn onto her skin. Her chestnut hair curled and pinned with small white roses. She was glowing, but her smile trembled when she thought no one was watching. Because this day, beautiful as it was, carried a shadow. 10 years earlier, her older sister, Rachel, had died in a car accident. The crash had happened just outside the city limits on a rural stretch with no lights and little traffic. Rachel's body had been identified only by dental records and a partial match to DNA. The fire had taken nearly everything, or so they believed. Emma had been just 19 then, too young to fully grasp the brutality of grief, but old enough to feel its weight press into her like an anchor. Yet here she was, trying to step into joy, to move forward, to start again. She never thought her wedding would feel like a betrayal. But how do you celebrate when one chair will always be empty? Music began to play from the speakers, low, soft, haunting in its sweetness. The pianist had chosen Claire de Lune as the prelude before Emma walked down the aisle. It had been Rachel's favorite piece when they were little, the kind of song that made you stop and stare at nothing. That's when it happened. A rustling not of wind or trees, but of whispers. Confused murmurs swelled among the guests. A woman was walking down the gravel path that led to the archway. She wasn't a guest. She wasn't part of the wedding party. Her shoes were worn, her dress plain and sun-faded. But what caught everyone's attention, what made Emma drop her bouquet, was her face. She looked like Rachel. No, more than that, she was Rachel. Some guests thought it was a cruel prank. Others believed it had to be a cousin or distant relative. A few gasped. One woman fainted. Emma stood frozen, mouth slightly open, eyes wide in disbelief. The woman didn't speak at first. She just stared at Emma with eyes that looked like they'd seen too much. Then she said the words that ripped open the day. "I'm sorry I missed the last 10 years. The wind died. The laughter stopped. A champagne glass fell to the grass, shattering the silence. The moment unraveled like a loose thread in an old sweater." Emma stepped back, heart racing, tears springing to her eyes. Her father, Gregory Moore, pushed through the crowd, red-faced, demanding answers. Emma's fiancé, Lucas, moved to stand protectively in front of her, but the woman, Rachel, flinched. She raised her hand slowly, as if the gesture could prove her innocence. "I'm not here to ruin anything," she said, her voice cracking. "I just didn't know where else to go." Gregory was the first to speak. "Rachel Moore is dead. I buried her myself," but the woman shook her head. "No, you buried someone else." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small object, barely visible in her trembling fingers, a rusted charm dangling from a chain, a tiny ballerina in mid-whirl. Emma recognized it instantly. It was the necklace she'd given Rachel the night before the accident. No one else knew she had it. Inside the house, the old Moore family photo wall remained untouched. Black and white frames held memories like relics: birthdays, holidays, Rachel's graduation. One photo in particular showed the two sisters, no older than 10 and 12, sitting in the back of a pickup truck, hair tangled from wind. Rachel holding Emma's hand tightly. That was the kind of bond they had. But 10 years of absence can break any thread. Rachel was taken inside. The wedding was put on hold. Guests scattered. Emma sat silently at the kitchen table while Gregory paced near the window, phone in hand. He was calling the sheriff. They needed to test her DNA, make sure. "Because none of this made sense," he said. "People don't just come back from the dead," he muttered. But the woman calling herself Rachel began to speak. She told them she'd woken up in a clinic 2 years after the supposed crash, that she'd been held there, drugged, disoriented, with no ID, no memory. For years, she'd believed she was someone named Mara. It wasn't until 2 months ago, when a nurse left a yearbook near her bed during a quiet night shift, that a memory broke free like a wave hitting a Dharma photo in the yearbook. Her own face, her real name, Rachel Moore. From that night on, she began to remember. Rachel said she escaped the clinic after weeks of planning. The building was in Montana, near Kalispell. She walked for days, lived in shelters, found work cleaning rooms at a roadside inn when she found a bus ticket left behind by a traveler heading to Boise. She took it. "I didn't know if anyone would believe me," she said, "but I had to try." Gregory didn't speak, not for a long time. Then he turned to her and said, "Where's the scar on your knee?" Rachel blinked, slowly bent her leg, and rolled up her jeans. There, just below the right kneecap, was a jagged white line, same shape, same place. Emma burst into tears, but even as emotion took over, something darker stirred underneath. Why had Rachel's body been identified through dental records? Who was buried in her place? And how could someone vanish for 10 years only to resurface? Without explanation, Gregory didn't wait. He contacted the county coroner's office that night, demanding access to the old records. He didn't sleep. Neither did Emma. Meanwhile, Rachel, still wearing the same dress she arrived in, slept in the guest room, the one that had once been hers. Her hands trembled as she traced the edges of her old bookshelf, where a sticker still read "Private," Rachel's only in faded ink. Downstairs, the wedding decorations remained untouched. The cake sat in the fridge, its frosting slowly hardening in the cold. At 3:12 a.m., Emma crept into the hallway and opened the door to Rachel's room. She found her sister staring at a photo of their mother, who had died of cancer 6 years earlier. "I missed her funeral," Rachel whispered. Emma couldn't speak. Rachel's hands trembled again. "I didn't even know she was gone. I thought she'd be here." Emma nodded, then sat beside her. "Who kept you from us, Ra?" Rachel's eyes darkened. I don't know his name, but I remember his eyes. They were always watching me. And he said one thing every time I asked about my past. You died. That's all you need to know. Somewhere outside, a motion sensor clicked on. A soft light illuminated the backyard, casting long shadows from the orchard trees. A shape moved between the rows, just for a moment. Emma stood quickly and went to the window, peering into the dark. But by then, there was nothing there, just the rustle of leaves and a faint hum of wind. Rachel stepped beside her. Did you see him? Emma blinked. See who? Rachel's voice dropped. The man who told me I was dead. He used to wear a green jacket. Emma turned to her, a cold crawling up her spine. Dad used to have a green sheriff's jacket. Rachel went pale. Then it might not have been a stranger. After all, Rachel Moore was the kind of girl who remembered everything. She remembered her first pet, a floppy-eared beagle named Dusty, who ran away during a thunderstorm and never came back. She remembered the precise pattern of freckles across Emma's nose when they used to lie in the grass, staring at clouds. She remembered the warmth of her mother's hugs and the smell of cinnamon in the house every Christmas Eve. But most of all, she remembered what it was like to feel safe. That part had been taken from her before the world ended, before the crash, before the 10 missing years. Rachel had been 24, working night shifts as a nurse at St. Luke's Medical Center in Boise. She was smart, reliable, often called in when someone else cancelled last minute. She didn't complain. She didn't party. Her life was structured, predictable, and filled with a quiet kind of joy that most people wouldn't notice unless they were looking for it. She had dreams, big ones. She wanted to become a trauma specialist and travel to underserved areas. She'd applied to a postgraduate program in Seattle and was awaiting the acceptance letter the night of the accident. That letter arrived 2 days after she was declared dead. Emma found it. She never opened it. Rachel's mother, Evelyn Moore, had been her closest friend. They spoke on the phone nearly every night. Evelyn was kind, fiercely loyal, and had a stubborn streak that made her both beloved and impossible to argue with. When Rachel graduated from nursing school, Evelyn made a scrapbook with handwritten notes on every page. For your future patients, may you be the last hand they hold on their hardest day. That scrapbook still sat on a shelf in the guest room. When Rachel found it, she cried for hours. Gregory Moore, on the other hand, had always been a hard man to read. A former sheriff, he was respected in the community, known for his stern demeanor, firm handshake, and cold coffee that somehow never bothered him. He wasn't cruel, just not soft. Rachel used to call him the statue, not to his face, but to Emma during long talks in their shared room when they were teenagers. Gregory had once said to Rachel, "The world doesn't give you time to fall apart. You stand. That's what you do." It wasn't advice, it was a command. Yet when Rachel died, Gregory changed. He withdrew, stopped going to church, stopped fishing, retired early, and started keeping to himself. Some thought he was mourning in silence. Emma, even back then, thought it was something more. In the weeks before the crash, Rachel had started noticing strange things. An unfamiliar car parked across the street, a phone call with no voice on the other end, her mailbox left open even when she was sure she'd closed it. She told her mum, she told Emma, everyone chalked it up to stress. She had a lot going on, they said. But then came the night of the accident. Rachel had been driving home from a shift, exhausted. She remembered that much. And then nothing, only flashes. Fire, smoke, a voice deep, calm, wrong saying, She won't be missed. In the clinic where she woke up years later, Rachel was told her name was Mara Whitmore. She was told she had been in a terrible accident, that her mind was fragile, that she'd fabricated memories to cope. They called it induced dissociative amnesia. They gave her pills. They gave her a journal and said to start fresh. So she did. For months, she believed them. Until one night, a new nurse started working there, a quiet woman named Clara, with gentle eyes and a habit of leaving books behind. Clara had a teenage daughter and often read during night shifts. One night, she left behind an old yearbook on the staff table. Rachel saw it while sweeping. She opened to a random page and stared into her own face. The caption read, "Rachel Moore, voted most likely to save the world." Everything cracked open after that. Back in Boise, Emma began sorting through old boxes in the attic. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Maybe proof, maybe comfort. She found Rachel's high school backpack, still zipped and untouched. Inside was a photo strip of the two of them at the county fair. Emma was 15, Rachel was 20. They were both eating cotton candy, laughing so hard one of the photos caught them mid-scream. On the back, Rachel had written, "Even when I'm not around, always love you, always." Emma folded the photo and put it in her pocket. Rachel had always had a mind like a vault. Even after all the years, memories started to return with vivid precision. The scar on her knee from when she fell off her bike chasing after Emma. The night she and Daniel Reed kissed behind the old water tower. The fight she had with Gregory after refusing to take a desk job at the sheriff's office. Everything was coming back, and with it came something darker, fragment. A memory of someone sitting beside her hospital bed, someone wearing a green jacket. She couldn't see the face, but she remembered the words. "You don't exist anymore, Rachel." Downstairs, Gregory sat alone at the dining table, turning over a sealed manila envelope. It contained the coroner's report from 10 years earlier. He hadn't read it in a long time. He wasn't sure why he had requested a second copy now. Maybe part of him was hoping to find a loophole, some oversight that would explain the impossible. The report was thorough. Dental match confirmed. The car was hers. The ID was hers. But something stuck out. In the personal effects section, the report said, "Necklace, none found." Gregory's brow furrowed. The ballerina necklace, Rachel still had it, late that night. Emma asked Rachel what she remembered about the day she left work. Rachel closed her eyes. "I remember pulling out of the parking lot. I remember headlights, bright ones, coming fast." She paused. "I remember someone opening my door, and then I think I was injected with something." Emma's voice dropped. "You think someone took you?" Rachel nodded slowly. They made it look like an accident, but it wasn't. Daniel Reed had married someone else 6 years ago. He and Rachel had dated briefly right before her disappearance, but things had ended awkwardly. Now he ran a small real estate business in town. When he heard about Rachel's return, he didn't believe it. He showed up the next day to see for himself. Their reunion was strange. They hugged, but it felt like two strangers pretending to remember how to dance. "You look the same," he said. "You don't," she replied. He laughed nervously, then asked the question no one else had the courage to ask. "If that wasn't you in the car, then who did we bury?" Rachel spent the next day walking the orchard path alone, retracing old steps. She found a rusted swing, set, nearly swallowed by weeds. She found a tin box, half buried under the porch, where she and Emma had stored emergency candy as kids. Inside the box, wrapped in plastic, was a letter addressed to her, written by Emma, dated 2 days after her funeral. It read, "Dear Ra, I don't believe you're gone. I don't care what they say. Every time the wind hits the trees, I hear your voice. Every time the light flickers, I think you're trying to talk to me. I'll never stop waiting." Rachel sat on the steps and cried. That night, Emma made up a bed for her sister in the room they used to share. It was still painted lavender, with old posters on the wall, Beyoncé, the OC, and a faded banner from Rachel's graduation. As Rachel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, she whispered, "What if I never remember everything?" Emma sat on the edge of the bed, holding her sister's hand. "Then we'll remember it together." In the silence that followed, they both felt the weight of 10 missing years settle between them, like a ghost neither had invited, but neither could ignore. Outside, the wind picked up, the swing creaked, the orchard trees swayed. At the edge of the property, headlights flickered in the dark. Someone was watching. It started with the photo. A single image slipped under the Moore family's front door the morning after Rachel returned. Emma had woken early to make coffee, still wearing her robe, still unsure whether she was dreaming. The sun was low, just starting to paint the kitchen walls in pale orange. She opened the door to grab the newspaper, but found an envelope with no name, no address. Inside was an old photograph, slightly bent at the corners, of Rachel sitting on a hospital bed. Her hair was shorter, her eyes tired. A date was scribbled in pen on the bottom right corner. March 7th, 2017, 4 years after her funeral. Emma called Rachel immediately. Rachel stared at the photo for a long time, then said softly, "That's me. I remember the sheets." Emma frowned. "You mean the blue pattern?" Rachel nodded. They were the only ones in the facility that had stripes. The nurse called it the ocean bed. I used to ask for it. Emma turned the photo over. On the back, a typed message, "You were never supposed to come back." Later that day, Gregory drove into town to request surveillance footage from a camera across the street. The owner of the local hardware store said the camera had stopped recording weeks ago. Coincidence, maybe. But when Gregory returned home, he found his office door ajar. He always locked it. Nothing appeared stolen, but his laptop had been moved. Files on his desk had been shuffled, and his drawer, the one with the pistol, was open. The gun was missing. Meanwhile, Rachel had begun to have nightmares. In them, she was walking down a hallway with no doors, only mirrors. When she looked into them, her reflection stared back without blinking. It never moved, just stared, while Rachel kept walking. In one dream, she opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out, only smoke. When she woke, the smell of antiseptic filled her nose, though no one else noticed anything. 3 days later, Emma received an email from an anonymous sender. The subject, "You're in danger." Attached was a scanned medical file, labeled with Rachel's real name, but stamped "deceased" in bold red letters across the top. The file detailed sedative use, memory suppression treatments, and a discharge form from a private institution in Montana. The signature at the bottom was the most disturbing part. Dr. Victor Lang, the same coroner who had signed Rachel's death certificate 10 years ago. Emma printed the email and brought it straight to Gregory. He stared at it for a long time, then muttered, "Lang retired 5 years ago, moved to Arizona, said he wanted to be near the desert, claimed the cold made his bones ache." Emma asked, "Did he ever say anything strange about Rachel's case?" Gregory hesitated, then finally said, "It was the only one he never felt comfortable closing. That night, Emma and Rachel sat together on the porch, watching the orchard trees sway in the wind. Rachel clutched the old ballerina necklace in her fist like a lifeline. "I remember him," she said softly. "Lang," Rachel nodded. "He came to the clinic once. I was half conscious. He told the nurse he was checking progress, but then he looked at me. I swear, Emma, he looked scared." Emma leaned forward. "What else do you remember?" Rachel's voice trembled. "He whispered to someone, 'We buried the wrong girl.'" The next morning, a car was found burned at the edge of the Moore Propertier black sedan, plates missing, engine still warm. Inside, under the driver's seat, was a syringe. The sheriff who arrived on the scene recognized the model as one registered to a private contractor in Kalispell, used frequently for transport services between care facilities. Emma looked at the ashes of the car and whispered, "They know she's here." Rachel stared silently, then turned and walked away, heading straight to the backyard shed. Emma followed her. Inside the shed, beneath the loose floorboard, Rachel uncovered a tin lunchbox wrapped in cloth. Emma asked, "What is that?" Rachel opened it. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of her in the clinic, some sleeping, some awake, some with restraints on her wrists. "I didn't remember hiding these," Rachel said, "but I must have before I escaped." Emma picked up one photo. Behind Rachel's bed, visible through the narrow glass window, stood a figure, Mel, broad shoulders, wearing a green sheriff's jacket. Rachel didn't need to say it. Emma already knew. Emma confronted Gregory that night. She didn't hold back. "How long have you known she was alive?" Gregory turned from the kitchen sink, eyes heavy. "I didn't. Don't lie to me. You told the sheriff's department you buried her. You told the coroner it was conclusive. You told me she was dead." Gregory's hands trembled. "I believed it." Emma slammed the photo on the table. "Then explained this." Gregory stared. The man in the background, the jacketed, was unmistakable. He sat down, head in his hands. "I was trying to protect you both." "From what?" Gregory whispered. "From the people I used to work for." 10 years ago, a sheriff's deputy named Carl Rennick had brought Gregory a case he wasn't supposed to see. A young woman, nameless, bruised, terrified, had been found wandering near the edge of town. She didn't speak, had no ID, but there was one thing she said before they took her away: "I'm not who they say I am." She was taken to a private medical center under contract with the county for a psychiatric evaluation. Gregory had tried to follow up but was shut down. Then, 2 weeks later, his own daughter was in an accident. Back in the present, Emma listened, stunned. "You think this is connected? That Rachel was taken because you got too close?" Gregory nodded. "I was warned. I didn't listen." And then she vanished. Rachel stepped into the room, her voice like ice. "You let them bury someone else in my name." Gregory couldn't meet her eyes. "I thought if I signed the report, they'd stop watching us." Days later, Emma received a package with no return address. Inside was a USB drive containing video footage from inside the Montana clinic. A camera set high on the wall pointed at a hallway. The timestamp read March 9th, 2017. Rachel walked slowly down the corridor, escorted by 2 nurses. But something was off. Another patient, a young woman, appeared in the frame, staring blankly into the wall, humming. She looked exactly like Rachel, same hair, same build, same scar on her knee. Rachel watched the video with her hand over her mouth. "That's not me," she said. Emma whispered, "It's a double. a decoy. Someone designed to keep her gone. Rachel decided she had to go back to Kalispell, to the facility she escaped from. Emma insisted on going to Gregory refused, saying it was too dangerous. Rachel turned to him. "You buried me once. You don't get to lock me away again." Before they left, Emma checked the mailbox one last time. Inside was a torn page from a Bible, Psalm 88. "I am counted with them that go down into the pit. I am as a man that hath no strength." Scrawled across the margin, "Return, and you'll wish you stayed dead." As they drove toward Montana, Rachel began to speak of the past, of the first time she tried to escape, of the nurse who helped her, Clara. "She told me there were others," Rachel said. "Girls like me, girls with different names, but the same story." "What happened to her?" Emma asked. Rachel looked out the window. "They made her disappear, too." Arrived at the facility's location, a clearing in the woods, they found nothing. No building, only a leveled field surrounded by barbed wire, as if it had been torn down, buried, erased. But at the center of the field stood one thing, a single mailbox, red flag up. Inside was a photograph of Rachel and Clara smiling, and behind them, Dr. Victor Lang. The photo in the mailbox changed everything. Rachel stood in the middle of the field where the clinic once stood, wind in her hair, dirt under her feet, holding proof that her memories were real, not imagined, not delusions, but real. Emma took the photo gently and turned it over. On the back, scrawled in pen, "Kalispell wasn't the beginning. Start at the lake." They didn't know what it meant yet, but Rachel did remember a lake. When she was first moved from the facility, she'd spent nearly 8 months in a place she remembered only in flashes. A cold room, an iron bed, a view of pine trees from a single window, and beyond the trees, water. It had to be Flathead Lake, the largest natural freshwater lake west of the Mississippi, a place locals said could hide a warship and, maybe, as Rachel and Emma would discover, something darker than that. They drove to Flathead, the sky turning, steel gray, clouds low over the mountains. Emma was tense behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. "What if they're still watching us?" she asked. Rachel stared out the window. "They are." At a gas station on the outskirts of town, they asked an old man for directions to any old private medical centers that might have existed by the lake. The man scratched his beard and said there was one years back Whisper Lake House, run by some psychiatric group, but it shut down after a fire. "Nothing left now but ruins," he said. "Where, exactly?" He pointed, "About 6 miles that way, down a private road. You'll need to walk part of it. Trees have taken most of it." Back, they parked and hiked in. Branches clawed at their jackets, and the scent of pine and decay grew heavier with every step. After nearly an hour of walking, they found it, a skeletal building, half collapsed, bricks blackened by fire, ivy swallowing the stone. Rachel stopped. Breathing. "This is it," she whispered. Emma followed her up the steps into the wreckage. The walls were charred, a metal bed frame twisted in one corner, cabinets gutted by fire. Then Rachel stopped. She turned toward what remained of a nurse's station. Slowly, she stepped behind the counter and reached down beneath a loose floorboard. Her hands trembled as she pulled out a rusted tin box. Emma watched in silence. Inside was a single cassette tape, a name tag Clara Mendez, R&R folded index card with a phone number, and something else, a small square photo of a girl. Not Rachel, but someone who looked exactly like her. They played the cassette that night in their motel room. Rachel had to use an old tape recorder they bought at a thrift store nearby. The tape hissed, then crackled, and Clara's voice filled the room. "If you're hearing this, it means they've either taken me or I've run. I don't know who. You are, but I hope it's you, Rachel. I hope you found this. You were brought here under a name that isn't yours. They said you were a Jane Doe, that you needed reprogramming. But I saw your file. I saw the real name. I saw the other one. Too, there's another girl. She looks just like you. I think they're testing something, swapping lives, controlling memories. They used to call her Echo. I don't know what that means. But I know this. They made you disappear because you knew something. Something they didn't want anyone else to find. Don't trust anyone. Not even family. Especially not family. Go to where it started. Go home, not just to Boise. Go back before that. Ask about the missing files. About Project Mirror. I left something in the locker at the old Greyhound station. Locker 43. Don't wait." They drove overnight, back to Boise, wired, afraid. Emma asked Rachel again what she thought Echo meant. Rachel shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe she's the decoy. Maybe I'm the decoy. Maybe we're both just pieces of something." The Greyhound station was mostly abandoned, but Locker 43 was still there. Inside was a manila envelope labeled Project Mirror, Draft 2, Confidential. A flash drive and a red baby blanket. Rachel touched the blanket with a gasp. "I remember this," she whispered, "from when I was a baby." Emma frowned. How would Clara have it? Rachel looked pale. "I don't think Clara put this here." They opened the Project Mirror envelope at home. Inside were governance-style documents, diagrams of brain scans, twin testing, identity fragmentation studies, behavioral control experiments, and 2 photos of baby girls, identical, one labeled Subject A, Rachel Moore, the other Subject B, Echo. Emma backed away. "You're saying you had a twin?" Rachel's eyes filled with tears. "I don't remember one, but I always felt something missing." Gregory came home that night to find both girls sitting at the dining table, files spread out like a crime scene. He saw the photos, the documents. He turned pale. "Where did you get these?" Rachel stood. "Start talking now." Gregory sat down, head in his hands. "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Emma demanded answers, and finally he gave them. "You were born under a program, a classified one. They called it Project Mirror, twins monitored from birth, raised with knowledge of self, the other controlled, watched, used." Rachel was shaking. "I was Subject A." Gregory nodded. "Your mother knew. She begged me to pull you both out, but we couldn't. The state had rights." Emma screamed. "What do you mean the state had rights?" Gregory's voice was hoarse. "They let us keep one. The other vanished." Rachel whispered, "So, who died in that car?" Gregory closed his eyes. Echo. Silence hung in the room. The girl they buried 10 years ago wasn't Rachel. It was her twin, the one no one remembered, the one who'd been erased before she ever had a chance to live. Rachel stared out the window, heart pounding. If she was raised as me, then who am I now? Emma stood beside her. "You're my sister, no matter what." But in Rachel's eyes, something had shifted, a doubt that couldn't be silenced. That night, Rachel listened to the tape again. This time, she noticed something new. At the very end of Clara's message, nearly inaudible, was a whisper, one word, Elkhorn. Rachel looked it up. Elkhorn was a ghost town in Montana, a former mining village. Now nothing but silence and ruins, and one building still standing, a church. Rachel stood and packed a bag. "I have to go." Emma grabbed her arm, not alone, but Rachel shook her head. "If this is about who I really am, I need to face it myself." Emma didn't argue. She just handed her the ballerina necklace, for luck. As Rachel left the house that night, Emma turned to Gregory. "I don't know who you are anymore." Gregory looked at her with haunted eyes. "I'm the man who thought he could control the truth and ended up killing it instead." Elkhorn, Montana, wasn't on most maps anymore. What once had been a small mining town was now a graveyard of rotting wood and wind-battered stone, tucked deep in the mountains where no one went unless they were lost or searching for something too dangerous to leave buried. Rachel arrived just after dawn. Fog clung to the trees like cobwebs, and the air was still with the kind of silence that makes your heart beat louder than it should. Her boots crunched softly on gravel as she stepped past an old sign. "Half Fallen, Elkhorn, EST, 1868. No phone signal, no houses, just one structure still upright at the town center, the church. Its white paint peeled like dead skin, windows shattered, the bell tower hung limp without a bell. Yet the door was shut tight, not rotting, not rusted. Rachel approached slowly. Then she saw it. A handprint, faint on the front door, smudged in ash. She pushed the door open with both hands. The hinges groaned. Inside, the pews were mostly destroyed, some toppled, others burned. Charred hymnals lay scattered like blackened leaves. At the front of the room, where the altar once stood, there was now only a trapdoor. She stared at it. The symbol on it was familiar to mirrored silhouettes facing each other. The same logo from the Project Mirror documents. Rachel dropped to her knees and opened the trapdoor. A narrow stairway led into darkness. She hesitated only a moment, then descended. Each step creaked under her weight. A musty, metallic scent hit her halfway down. Rust, dust, and something else. Chemicals. She reached the bottom. A long corridor stretched before her, lit only by a flickering fluorescent light. Doors on either side, metal, labeled with numbers. She passed room 3, then room 5, then stopped. Room 7. The door was ajar. Inside was a perfectly preserved medical chamber, a cot with straps, a cabinet full of vials, and in the corner, a TV screen glowing blue. She stepped closer. The screen flashed, then played a video footage of 2 girls, no more than 3 years old, playing with wooden blocks. Both identical, one labeled Rachel, the other Echo, the time stamp in the corner. 1993, Rachel watched, frozen. She was 3 years old with a sister, real one, and no one had told her. The video cut out, replaced by static, then a voice. "If you're seeing this, Rachel, then you made it further than anyone thought." She turned. The voice came from a speaker embedded in the wall. "Project Mirror was terminated because of you, because you remembered. But before we erased everything, you saw something you shouldn't have. You saw her file. Your twin was never meant to live past 7. Echo was an experiment in obedience. But you were the mistake. The control subject who asked too many questions." Rachel staggered back, her breath caught in her throat. The voice continued. "We tried to switch you, swap your lives. Echo would live your life. You'd vanish into data. But Echo broke. She refused to be you. So we burned the project literally. But fire doesn't destroy ghosts. Rachel turned and ran out of the room, back into the hall. She tried the next door locked, another locked, until room 12. Inside, dozens of files. Cabinets lined the walls. One stood open. Inside, a folder labeled Rachel Moore, Echo, Final Report. She opened it. Page 1, Medical History. Page 2, Progress Reports. Page 3, Termination Order, signed by Dr. Victor Lang, approved by G. Moore, her father. She dropped the folder. The floor tilted. Her father hadn't just known. He hadn't just covered it up. He had signed off on her death. She stumbled. Out into the corridor again, dizzy, stomach churning. Then she heard it. A footstep, not hers. She turned. A figure stood at the far end of the hallway, male, tall, in a green sheriff's jacket. Rachel stepped back. "Who are you?" she demanded. The man stepped closer. His face emerged from the shadows. It was not her father, but it was someone she recognized. Dr. Victor Lang. He looked older now. Hair grey, eyes tired, but too calm. "You weren't supposed to come back," he said. Rachel backed away. "You're supposed to be dead." He smirked. A convenient rumor. She clenched her fists. "You killed my sister." Lang shook his head. "No, your father did." Rachel ran through the hallway, up the stairs, out the church. Lang didn't follow. She didn't stop running until she reached her car. Hands shaking, she turned the ignition. Gravel spat beneath the tires as she drove out of Elkhorn like a woman possessed. Back in Boise, Emma waited anxiously. Rachel hadn't called in hours. Then, just before midnight, the door opened. Rachel stood there, wild-eyed dirt on her clothes, ash in her hair. She collapsed into Emma's arms. "He signed it," she whispered. Emma held her tighter. "What?" "My death order, Dad. He signed it." They confronted Gregory together the next morning. He didn't deny it. "I did what I thought would protect you," he said. Rachel's voice was like steel. "You chose silence over truth." Gregory looked at Emma. "You weren't supposed to find this. I buried it for a reason." Emma spat back. "You buried her." Rachel left that night. She didn't say where she was going, only that she needed to find Clara. She believed Clara was alive, and she was right. In a quiet corner of Oregon, Rachel tracked her down through a forgotten nurse's registry and a friend of a friend who still owed Clara a favor. She found her in a women's shelter, working under a different name. They stared at each other. A long time before speaking. Clara whispered, "I never stopped hoping you'd remember." Rachel hugged her. They wept. Clara confirmed everything. Project Mirror had over a dozen subjects. Most failed, only to survive to childhood. Rachel and Echo. Rachel was meant to be the control. Echo, the programmable twin. But Echo resisted. She loved Rachel. When they tried to erase Rachel's identity, Echo fought back. She stole the car, faked the accident, tried to save her sister, and died in the process. Echo had never been the monster. She was the hero. Rachel returned to Boise weeks later. She had one goal left: tell the world. She brought the documents, the photos, the audio files, and handed them to a journalist named Helen Stokes, who specialized in government whistleblower stories. The article broke the internet. The headline: "She was buried 10 years ago, then walked into her sister's wedding." The fallout was swift. Dr. Lang was arrested. Others were named. Gregory Moore resigned from public life, vanishing into obscurity, and Rachel Shee finally got her name back. But more importantly, Echo did too. She had a memorial built not for herself. For Echo, the plaque read, "For the sister who died trying to save the one the world forgot. You lived with courage. You died with truth." Beneath that, her name, Echo, and she mattered. The cemetery was quiet that morning. No reporters, no cameras, no speeches. Just Rachel, Emma, and Clara standing before a stone that hadn't existed. Until a month ago, it read, Echo Moore, 1990 to 2013. She lived unseen. She died with courage. Rachel placed a single white lily at the base. It had taken weeks to get the name approved, months to get the government to admit she had ever existed. But the stone was here now, a marker, a truth, a sister. They had buried Echo in the same plot Rachel had once occupied. Rachel had requested it herself. She gave me my life back. The least I can do is give her her name. When they exhumed the remains, forensic confirmation was immediate. No dental match, no fingerprints on file. Just a body that had worn Rachel's jacket, Rachel's ring, Rachel's identity, because she'd chosen to protect her sister. Rachel stood at the grave a long time, Emma beside her, silent. She used to hum when she was scared, Rachel whispered. Emma looked over. You remember that? Rachel nodded. I couldn't place it before, but the hum, I heard it in my dreams. I thought it was mine. It was hers. She closed her eyes. I think I spent my whole life feeling like a ghost, and it turns out I was the one who survived. Clara placed her hand on Rachel's shoulder. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Some silences speak louder than grief. They left the cemetery as the wind picked up, rustling through the trees. Somewhere nearby, a bell rang, soft, hollow, distant. Rachel stopped. She turned back, staring at the grave one more time. Then she said, You can rest now. Emma and Rachel moved into a small rental house just outside Boise. Nothing extravagant. 2 bedrooms, a garden in the back. They didn't try to recreate the past. They just started again. Rachel kept busy. She began therapy, wrote a lot, filled journals with half memories, pieces of her story that came back in fragments. She baked more than she used to, adopted a cat with crooked ears she named Echo. Emma returned to her teaching job. The wedding she had postponed never happened. Lucas, her fiancé, had quietly stepped away after Rachel's return. I think you need time with your sister, he'd said, and I think I need to figure out who I am outside of all this. There was no bitterness, only honesty and healing. The story stayed in the media for months, but eventually the noise faded. What remained was a book. Rachel had written it herself, titled simply The Girl Who Was Buried Twice. It became a bestseller not because of the scandal, but because of the heart. People didn't just read it, they felt it. One afternoon, months later, Gregory showed up at Rachel's door. He looked older, smaller, no badge, no authority, just a father who had lost everything trying to protect nothing. Rachel didn't slam the door. She didn't hug him either. She listened. I was raised to believe that silence kept people safe, he said. But silence buried my daughter. He handed her a small box. Inside was an old cassette, labeled in faded pen, Rachel and Echo, age 3. I kept it, he said, because I couldn't let myself forget, even when I pretended I had. Rachel took it without a word. Gregory turned to leave, but just before he stepped off the porch, she said, I'll never forget what you did, but I'll also never forget that you showed up anyway. He nodded. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. That night, Rachel played the tape home. recording a birthday. Two small voices singing, giggling. Echo's voice was slightly softer than hers. Their mother's voice in the background, singing along, clapping. Make a wish, girls. We wish to be the same forever. Laughter, cake, music. Rachel sat on the couch, eyes closed, letting the sound wash over her, like rain on dry ground. 1 year later, on the anniversary of Echo's funeral, Rachel visited the grave alone. She brought a new flower, yellow rose, Echo's favorite. She sat for a long time, then opened a letter and read aloud, "Dear Echo, I don't know if souls recognize each other after death. I don't know if you hear me now, but I know you saved me. You chose to die so I could live. I promise I'll never waste what you gave me. I promise I'll live twice as hard, once for me and once for you. And when I look in the mirror, I'll smile, not just because I see myself, but because I see you, too." She folded the letter and placed it under the rose. A breeze swept past. Somewhere in the distance, a songbird called, and Rachel whispered, "Goodbye, Echo, thank you." 1 year later, almost to the day, a different kind of gathering took place on the Moore family property. No white chairs, no evirapt arch, no vows, just a handful of people, family, friends, survivors, standing together beneath the same orchard trees where, not long ago, a wedding had been interrupted by a ghost. Except this time, it wasn't a ghost that arrived. That was the truth. Rachel stood at the front of the small crowd, her hair loose in the wind, a small microphone trembling in her hand. Behind her was a framed photograph of Echo, the same smile, the same eyes, the same quiet strength. Below the frame, carved into a wooden stand, just one word, "Remember," Rachel spoke. "I used to think my story ended 10 years ago when they said I died, when they buried someone and called her me." She paused, looked at the photo. But it didn't end, because she wouldn't let it. Her voice cracked. "Echo gave me everything. She gave me the chance to be seen, the chance to come back, the chance to live." A breeze moved through the trees. "I came here once as a guest at a wedding. Now I come here as a witness to the unthinkable." She looked out at the crowd. "Most people won't believe our story. They'll call it conspiracy. They'll say it's too wild, too painful, too far gone." She smiled, "But I've learned that the unbelievable is just the truth, dressed in scars." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low behind the orchard, Emma found Rachel sitting on the old porch, swinging the same swing they used as kids. Rachel held a worn yearbook in her lap. Emma sat beside her, quiet at first. Then she asked, "Do you still feel like her?" Rachel looked up. "You mean Echo?" Emma nodded. Rachel thought about it. "Sometimes I feel like we've traded places 1,000 times in my head. Like she's still in here, holding the pieces I dropped." She looked down at the necklace in her hands. The ballerina still spun, even after everything. "But I also feel like me now, finally." They sat there until the stars came out, until the only sounds left were the soft creaks of the swing and the wind moving through the apple trees. Rachel whispered, "Do you remember what she said in that video? The little version of her?" Emma smiled. "We wish to be the same forever." Rachel nodded. And for a moment, in the hush of that evening, they were. Months passed. Rachel moved to Portland, where she took a job as a trauma counselor for women who had been institutionalized. Without consent, she never used her story to gain fame. She only told it to help others find theirs. She began mentoring girls from the foster system, joined panels, gave a TED Talk titled "Being Buried Isn't Always the End." In every talk, every meeting, every conversation, she said the same thing. My sister didn't die to make me feel special. She died to make me feel real. Emma stayed in Boise, eventually marrying a man named Caleb, quiet, kind, who never asked too many questions but always listened when she needed him to. Rachel was her maid of honor. They kept it small, just family, no dramatic entrances. But this time there was a chair set aside at the front, empty except for a yellow rose and a note that read, "For Echo, you were never missing again." And Rachel, she kept writing. One book became two became five. But it was the last one, the quiet one, the one she almost didn't publish, that left the biggest mark. It was a memoir, no titles, no chapters, just letters, one to her father, one to her mother, one to Clara, one to Emma, and the last one to Echo. The final page simply read, "I was buried 10 years ago, but you brought me back. I don't know where you are now, but if souls leave footprints, yours are beside mine every step, every day, forever." On the final line, she wrote the words that would become the most quoted sentence in everything she ever wrote. She died for me to remember who I was so I could become who she never had the chance to be.